Yo, what's going on, guys? This is Ryan back here with Jason Freiert, and we're here on another episode of the CTW podcast.
What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us. So this is part 2 of our conversation with Keith Watson. If you have not checked out part 1, I suggest you do that now before you get into this one. And this one, he talks about a lot of the high-level wrestlers that he coached over the years, which was quite a few good ones.
Yeah, in the first episode 1, I got to learn a lot about Watty growing up and getting into wrestling, as well as some of his early days coaching. And, I'm excited to see what part 2 brings.
Let's get to it.
You've coached at both the private school and public school and been successful at both. And just kind of comparing and contrasting. Before that, again, when I was looking back and doing a little bit of research, I saw about, when it was time to make the transition from Bel Air to John Carroll, that you were actually approached before you left, that Slutsky had come up to you and approached you about taking John Carroll in 2001, and you didn't take it. There's actually a story in The Patriot that said Slutsky asked me if I was interested in coaching at John Carroll, but I told him I couldn't that year because I committed to one kid and couldn't leave him. If the job is open the following year, I'll take it. I'm big on respect and commitment. I go to war for my guys, and they'll do the same for me. I couldn't leave them after I made the commitment. So, that was something that really stood out, that there was a kid that you needed to you wanted to see through what you guys started together before you made that jump, even if it would have been more beneficial to you personally.
Well, that was Tim Kassouf, who wanted to be the state champ his senior year, and he got a combination of got a full ride combination academic and athletic to Drexel. But I basically told him, I said, just like I did with Jeremiah, I think you got what it takes. We're going to accentuate the positive. Nobody can hold you down, and you're short enough that most of the guys you're wrestling, you're going to be able to duck them under real easy. And he won his finals match 1-0 because he was able to get off the bottom. But basically, I told him, you do what I ask you to do, and I'll be here for you. I'm not going to leave. And this kid would work harder. He was carrying 85-pound dumbbells up and down sets of 2-3 flights of steps.
He was a beast, yeah. 189-pounder.
Yeah, but he only weighed 184. And I'm like, no, you're not going down to 71 or 2 or whatever it was at that time. Let's just be big and strong. And he had legs like, ham hocks, and you couldn't be held down. So, but yeah, you make that commitment, you got to follow through.
This is something that I kind of wanted to ask. I've changed locations, coaching in Howard County, and then now it's still public school. But I know Jason has been involved, but not in the same capacity. He was the head coach at Hammond, and then had when he started having a family and more responsibilities at work, had to kind of dial it back a little bit. Is there ever a good time to walk away? You know what I mean? It's like. I feel like every time there's a kid that I need to see him through. But
yeah, we've talked about that. When you left or when I left, it was same kind of thing as you're saying, Watty. It was like, okay, this senior class, but then it's like, this junior class. It's very tough to make that transition. So did you do it the next year? Go to John Carroll?
Yes. But Kassouf graduated the next year. I started at John Carroll, and my last year at John Carroll, like I said, I gave my athletic director a 5-year plan, 5-year notice, and so that was that was the easy way out there. Even though I was walking away from 5 or 6 really good juniors, but I also had a guy taking over that had been with me for 5 or 6 years, Tommy Free. The kids knew him, they liked him. It seemed like a logical. There shouldn't have really been any big letdown. Plus, we were starting our own junior program, and I was going to be kind of the commissioner, just basically the person who made sure everybody had what they wanted. I knew the secret handshake at the school. I had keys. I knew where the mop heads were kept and all those sort of things. So it wasn't like I was going away altogether. I'm just letting somebody else do the heavy lifting. And then, then all the things that went on with the MSWA, with the lawsuit and all that made it easy for me to just say, okay, I'm not going to be viewed the way those guys were viewed, as I was doing something with MSWA resources to help John Carroll like they were with another school. So I just clean ties. So it made it easy. But I do know what you're saying, man. It's just like Slutsky. Was Slutsky retired from Aberdeen, but yet he's still coming to the dual meets. the next
Right.
year. It's very difficult. So I don't know that there's a good time unless you have something to definitely move on to, because you can't just stop. Very few coaches, there's one coach, Joe Gass, that was at Eastern Tech way back when. They had a great program. Well, he lives right across the way from me. I see him at the grocery store. I'm like, Joe, why don't you come? He's like, nah, I'm done. So when he was done, he was done.
Right. Yeah. Well, so my mentor coming up through coaching, or a big mentor for me, is Toke. It's Pedro Barbosa, who won 2 state titles for Hammond. And he built, a program out of kids that never wrestled before. I always try to tell him, hey, can you come back in? He's dipping back in the room now from time to time, but he was almost like, it was almost like an addict. Like, I can't touch it, because once I touch it, I'm going to want it all the time. And I just need to walk away clean.
That is 100% right. You can't, I could not just keep my toe in the water. Either I'm in or I'm out.
Yeah, it's no, I mean, that's one thing I guess every coach has to face at some point.
Well, then the other thing is I would be second guessing. And the way it worked out, we had a lot of success at John Carroll, and you just don't want you don't need to be looming over somebody that's filling your shoes. It's like, listen, if you need me, I'm here, but I'm not going to be in the corner, watching you run practice or anything. I'm going to be a resource.
Yeah.
Not be second guessing what you're doing.
Well, you want him to get the best out of that coach as well, right? And like, if you were there, that could be, and even though your intentions are good, just being the presence there, them doubting themselves or second guessing themselves, that might make it tough. And now concentration's being taken off of where it needs to be, which is creating, continuing to run the program.
I think you're right.
So like, from that transition from public to private, obviously there's going to be a lot of differences, but even just, changing locations in general, you're coming in coaching, obviously you have a freshman class coming in, but then the sophomores, juniors, seniors, they're used to a different system. Did they accept you with open arms, or did it take a little bit to win them over?
They had a sort of a Mickey Mouse program at that point. I mean, really, they had one kid with rec experience, 1 or 2 kids with rec experience, but they weren't really having success. And I knew what they were used to was kind of Slutsky left the year before I came in. They were in transition. They had 1 year with another coach that was just sort of going through the motions. Even though he had success back when he was a coach, his name is Gary Scholl, he was kind of going through just the league schedule, no other tournaments, and they were just sort of having a good time. So I knew if I came in there and started whipping and driving, I was going to run them out the room. So I had to take baby steps into the whole thing and sort of get them to buy what I was selling. And my assistant coach, who had wrestled at high school, I think he might have been MSA placer way back when. He was a brand new teacher, and he was an assistant football coach. Well, we had gotten together, and I said, we need you to tell those JV football players they need to wrestle. So, make a long story short, the year before I got there, they had 14 kids on the team. My first year, we had 35. None of them 1 or 2 of them knew a little wrestling, but the majority were just football players. So I had to teach them how to get off the bottom, how to get hand control, how to snap, how to bang heads, and just how to teach them how to find some success.
Right.
And you can't, if you're running them like dogs, you know what I mean? If you're running sprints all the time and you're doing bazillion push-ups, it's like, we needed to learn wrestling. They're athletes. They'll figure it out. And then I went back to Dick Slutsky. And Dick Slutsky basically said, have your kids do sit out, turn in 25 times. They're probably huffing and puffing. All right, so now you've worked on their cardio, and you also refined a wrestling technique. We were big on stand up, turn and face, take a shot, back down to your base. Those chain wrestling moves without a partner. Now do it with a partner. So now you have to lift and you have to mat return. That'll get you huffing and puffing. So we don't need to do perfect push-ups. And, I mean, of course you do that stuff also, but you do wrestling-related things to get the cardio out, get your cardio worked out while you're trying to teach kids wrestling technique.
Yeah, so, like, and this is, I don't know if anybody else is going to benefit from this, or whether this is just for my, my own, information. But What do you do then when you have, so I'm going to use Owings Mills where I'm currently coaching as an example. Primarily the kids coming in are no wrestling experience. And to be honest with you, most of them don't even have the balls to step up and wrestle until they're a sophomore or junior. We get very little freshmen out, or they're, adjusting to the academics. But on the other hand, I have Alex DeFore, who's a 2-time state champ, Phil Smith, that's a 2-time state champ. Those guys need to be trained like it's training. What would you do in that situation if you have 2 elite level wrestlers and then the rest are first timers?
Well, just having 2, I don't know. That's difficult. When I was in this similar situation, we had 5, 6, or 7. I would say we had 5 or 6 that were very good, but then we had a whole bunch of others that spoke the language and they understood what I was looking to get done. I made all the returning kids coaches. I had them all grab a newbie and teach them and work with them for, like, let's say the first week, so to make sure that the rookies understood the terminology and knew the basic, understood what I was looking for when it came to when you pick an ankle. It's not an ankle, it's the top of the foot. You need shoelaces. You don't want ankle. Just
Right.
those little things. So I would make the returning kids instructors, and I believe when you have a kid try to transfer that information, it reinforces it in their mind. So it helps them get better. But we would do that for the first week, and then periodically we would have another day where we would spend, like for the very beginning of practice, we would get back matched up again, and we would do the same thing. And I always thought that worked out very well. In fact, I know it worked out well because our rookies got good pretty quick. Not good, but good enough that they could hold their own. And that's why we were able to have 2 varsity teams. And we did it for 1 year, then I got in trouble. But still, our backup guys were beating all the public schools in Hartford and Cecil County.
Gotcha. Okay. And didn't McDonough,
What's that?
when we were coaching at Hammond, didn't McDonough have a B team that was at Newtown?
Yeah,
Bulls?
we beat McDonough B team.
Yeah, it was, and it was a close match if I recall.
I mean, that's such a good. So are they not allowed to do that anymore, Watty?
So I got in trouble. I come into school one day, and the athletic director pulls me in. And he goes, "I need you to listen to this message." And it was Ned Sparks left a message for our athletic director that said, "You will not have your JV wrestle any more public MPSSA varsity teams, or you won't wrestle any more MPSSA teams, period, in any way, shape, or form." And he goes, "What's this all about?" I said, "Well, I told you we had 2 varsity teams." He goes, "Yeah, but you didn't tell me this was violation of a rule." I said, "I don't know that it is a violation of a rule. When I was in high school, Beller had a varsity A, varsity B, Aberdeen had a varsity A, varsity B, and what's the problem if my JVs beat another team's varsity? Who cares? It's not like they had an unfit. They didn't get anything out of it. The other team, because you get points for winning. Well, they didn't win, so they didn't get any points. So what's the difference?"
Yeah, and the other thing too. I mean, when McDonough, when we wrestled against them, they definitely had that team, and maybe this was later on when they were getting around that rules. They had, I think, some of their freshman studs were on that B team, so to speak. So it wasn't all second tier, because you know how it is. You go out throughout a season, you're gonna have JV kids filling in. You're gonna sit some guys, so it's not just 13 or 14 guys. I don't understand how you can't just be like, "Oh yeah, this is my varsity team." It's just that's who I put out there. That same thing as putting your second string in versus in football.
It is exactly the same. Let me tell you a quick story. So I would wrestle anybody anytime because we had the flexibility of schedule, and I could leave half of my team to practice and take 14 guys to go up and wrestle like Perryville. So we knew we weren't supposed to be letting our backup guys or our JV guys wrestle the varsity. So what I would do is I would take Chris Almany and Hunter Ritter, right? 2 All-Americans, national champs. We go up to wrestle Perryville. They sit on the bench. They weren't going to wrestle unless, because we got to win the match. We got to win the
right.
duel, but we can win 31-30. And so I would tell the coach over there, I said, "Listen, I need to win this match, but if you only lose to us 31-30 and we're ranked second in the state or whatever, that's kind of a win for you. Because nobody knows that I didn't have my number ones out there. And if anybody says anything, it was like, look, here's a national champ sitting right here on the bench. What do you mean I have my JVs?" So I tried
Right.
to follow it that way.
Yeah, I think they might have changed it where you couldn't be going to different events, right? So if you have your A squad going to, Iron Man or Beast of the East, then you also can't on that same day or weekend go into a tournament, which, I mean, I guess makes sense. But I mean, those dumb rules that are holding back public schools are probably a conversation for several other meetings.
Everybody has equal opportunity so that the have-nots don't feel bad.
Right. Yeah. Now, so like when you were coaching at when you started at John Carroll, you said there's very, very few with wrestling experience. Did that change?
Yeah, so once I got the recruiting thing, once we started to catch fire a little bit, we started beating the Harford County schools, and I would write an article for the newspaper about our, what happened in the dual meet, because the local guy would never cover our stuff. He only covered the public schools. So I'd write the article. He put the whole article in the newspaper and just put staff reporter instead of my name. So we were getting some good publicity. Plus we were doing fun things. Plus I was very visible with the junior programs. And then, we learned how to sell private school education and the money associated with it to people that didn't even have money saved for college.
Now, what would you say the major difference is between coaching at a public school program and a private school in your experience? So if there is, I know there's more than one, but one major difference.
It's just you have to be, if you're going to be successful in the private school, you need to be motivated and willing to put time in, mental time and physical time, into growing your program. Whereas when I was at Bel Air, I kind of did the same thing, but not nearly as much, because I just couldn't do anything. I described the handbook as five pages of what you can't do and 1 page of what you can do. And private schools, like I said, my AD said, don't embarrass me, don't ask me for money. So you figure out what you can do, what you can't do, what's going to work, but you have so much more flexibility with the private schools than the publics. And honestly, what the smart coach, I don't care whether it's Pete Welsh, Harry Barnaby, or anybody, they understand that you can't go hog wild. Just because you can get crazy doesn't mean you need to get crazy. You still are doing very basic, just a little bit different than the public schools are doing. All I ever did was look up a Solanco right up in Pennsylvania, very successful program, public school program, Pennsylvania. We wrestled the same number of matches as them. We did almost everything just the way they did it. And it wasn't all that different than Bel Air was doing, just a couple more matches. We were able to go to the Beast. They can't. I don't know. What's a big attraction to the Beast? You got to go to the
it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is in December. It's
right.
like going
to.
What's that?
No, hold on. No. Well, I'm not letting you off with that one so easy. They're like, what's this big thing about the Beast? It's an amazing tournament.
I believe it is too. But the Beast and those kind of big shows, it seems to me like your season should start off with, you start practicing day one, you work your way up the ladder, you get to counties, regions, states, nationals. Do you need to be, all right, 2 weeks of practice, now we're going to Iron Man. Then we're going to wrestle dual meet. Now we're going to go to the whatever. Then we're going to go to the Beast. It says, So you got
it doesn't necessarily
in the middle of the season.
It doesn't have to be the pinnacle of everything, but I mean, me and Mackin were fortunate enough to actually attend the Beast when it wasn't on Sunday. And it was cool. I mean, we got worked, but it was just a cool experience. So, and I think it definitely helped us. Now, I mean, if you got, studs that are going to be placing left and right, and it's not a big deal for a tournament for them, and then, you probably don't want to work them out, but it was just, for me, it was just something that I remembered, and it helped when I got to states that it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Watty.
It's just, it's a matter of perception. I wanted my guys healthy for the year. And when I have Matt Miller, who, Matt Miller was an All-American in Navy. Matt and Hunter Ritter was a 3-time qualifier and won national 6 times on the world team. Matt Miller got 4th, and Hunter Ritter got 3rd. I'm wondering what was the point in them going to that tournament? What did they get out of it? They'd already been to Fargo. They'd already been to the big shows. And I was concerned with my scholastic season These guys getting through it start to finish without getting injured. So we get to the end of the year and let's get it. I believe that if you finish second at the Beast and you don't win states, nobody remembers you got second at the Beast if you don't win states.
You don't think?
My opinion.
Okay. No, I mean that's fair.
The other
well, I don't know. I think people are going to remember if you got second at the Beast.
Oh,
Maybe
right.
not seventh, but
wait, Jason, who remembers that? Hardcore wrestling people, but not the average spectator.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more thinking of college coaches or recruiting aspects.
Let's take all that away. Like, who cares what they place? Like, the wrestling at the Beast is an experience that I'll always get to remember. I got to be there wrestling on the same mat as just some of these absolute studs, and that was a really cool experience for me. Now, maybe
it was because we were in a public school, man, and that was the one thing. Watty, you got these guys going all over the place, so yeah, of course it's not that big of a deal.
But see, here's my point. But like Ryan, you guys, we're wrestling people, so we understand the value of the event. But the average person is not a wrestling person. The average person watches wrestling until their kid quits and then they're done. Or the kids involved until they had enough of it, then they're done. They don't appreciate it. What's that tournament at the beginning? It's a preseason tournament, Super 32. What is the point in Super 32? I've seen, Hunter Ritter went there and he won the tournament. He got it almost, we thought he had a detached retina because a kid that wasn't ready for prime time because he just didn't have his cardio right, took a cheap shot at Hunter. Could have lost his whole season because he went to a useless, meaningless. You win the Super 32 and you don't win states. How do they balance out? I don't think.
I mean, Super 32s. See, I mean, we can agree to disagree on it, but I mean, my thing is Super 32, and my perspective with it. Look, I'll bring to national tournaments in the off season. I'll bring JV kids there, or I'll bring first year varsity kids there that have no prayer of winning a match. But the reason why I do it is because when they walk out, and these are kids that haven't wrestled before, when they walk out and they see 30 mats across the floor and they're looking around, and then, the county championship the next year, that doesn't seem that big of a deal. They've been to an ocean. This aquarium isn't throwing them off, but it's just something to expose them to so that the mental edge is still there.
I think Watty's talking about like the elite, which is true.
Well, I'm talking about in season also. What Ryan Ryan said out of season, that's different. I'm totally with you. But in season, we've got 4 months and everybody watches what happens at the end of the season versus it just doesn't seem to me, and it's a matter of opinion, it seems like it gets in the way. Those big shows, they get in the way. Because you go to one of those things and you get thumped or you get hurt and you don't get to finish your season. I just don't think in December for the Beast.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good sort of segue into just scheduling in general. So, I mean, when you were setting your schedule, I mean, obviously at John Carroll, you have a little bit more flexibility. Bel Air, not as much. Did you, try to set it up like more of a cupcake in the beginning and then progressively get harder? You're building in breaks, or like, how are you handling the scheduling?
And let's talk about like the early, when you first took over John Carroll also, like how do you set that schedule compared to later on?
So I needed to build confidence, and I knew that my guys could hang with the local public schools in Harford County. And so I got as many of them on our schedule as possible. We had to wrestle the B conference, and the B conference had, some good wrestlers here and there, like Annapolis Christian, when Kirby, I can't think of his last name, Kirby was coaching there. Annapolis Christian was pretty good. They would beat they beat 9 out of 10 teams. So the B conference didn't have real good wrestling across the board, but they had good wrestlers. So we just basically wrestled the B conference, and then we wrestled locally. And then as we got better, we started wrestling tougher and tougher competition. And then the one thing that I hung out there was, we can go to the Beast. Well, now I got to go to the Beast. So what we wind up doing is we would take the guys that were ready for the Beast or whose parents insisted that their kids got to go 0-2 at the Beast. I would let them go to the Beast, and then we take everybody else to a tournament over at William Penn.
Okay.
Where we knew that was where we belonged, and we had a shot. I believe everybody wants a shot. You want to feel like you got a shot at winning. You're not just in this tournament for mat time. We want to try to win. And I hated going to tournaments where we had no shot of being in the top 5. Like Escape the Rock. We went up there. I thought it was a good tournament. I don't remember where we placed, but I felt like we belonged, even though that was like the Beast light.
Right. Okay. No, and it looked like early on it paid off. One person I did want to talk about and his experience was, I believe it was your first MIAA champ, Zach Shulin, who, he comes in, he had no prior experience, correct?
Right.
Another heavyweight, you have, if nothing else, you're consistent. You're building these, between Kasuf and Albright and now Shulin, you're building up some really good upper weights year after year. You keep putting them out. Talk to me a little bit. I know that he had a pin against Janowski from Calvert Hall in the finals of the MIAAs. And then he goes on to the state tournament and wrestles Brady Smith from Loyola. Was Smith there the prior week at MIAAs?
He pinned, I believe he pinned Brady Smith in like a minute in the semis.
Oh, okay. So, it didn't go his way this time at the state tournament. You want to talk about that some?
Well, okay. So, yeah, he got through the semis, no problem. And we were at McDonough. Zach lived over in Loch Raven. So I told him, I said, look, you got like 5-6 hours before the finals. Why don't you run home, take a shower, get something to eat, take a little nap, but just be back here by like 4 o'clock because the parade of the champions or whatever started at 5. And then you're not going to wrestle till like 6:30 anyways because heavyweights always last. Well, he leaves with his parents. Not everybody had cell phones back then. And Haswell and Pete or Steve Truitt, I go up to they call me to the head table, and they said Brady Smith has got to do this special thing, this special banquet that night for football. And so because of that, we are going to do X, and we're going to run that match at 4 o'clock before, like an hour plus before the regular tournament.
Oh, before the parade even starts, like before the wow.
And
Jeez.
So instead of standing my ground and telling me no, we're not doing it, I went into panic mode and I got to get this kid back, and no cell phone. Nobody's answering his phone. I couldn't get hold of his parents. And finally, he had to be back by like 4 o'clock. At like 3:30, I got him on the phone. He just woken up, and he jumped in his car and he drove over, and he comes stumbling in, and we're ready to wrestle. And he went out and he laid an egg, and he lost. And I'll never forget that one. That was totally on me. And I jumped Haswell's ass, and I said, I'm jumping your ass because I'm mad at me, but we should have been in this position.
Right. So, like, you not putting your foot down, was the motivation behind that? That was part of it. That he took care of him a week prior. He's whatever. Anytime he plays, we're good. Was there a little bit of cockiness towards it, or do you think it was more you just want to do the right thing for a kid and try to do them a solid?
Well, see, you're making it sound like I actually thought about it. No, I'm a good rule follower. You tell me something this is the rule. All right, I'm gonna.
You just said you wrestled a guy when you weren't supposed to. You're not a total rule follower.
No, not total.
Yeah, that's true. You had 2 teams, Watty.
I usually follow the rules. And when Haswell Franklin, when the tournament director says, this is what we're doing, okay, that's what we got to do. So I just went with it. And I should have done it. And like I said, I regret it. And then every time I see Zach, I just sort of like, geez, I still can't believe that I did that.
Yeah, I think that, and well, I want to say that was your second year, I think, or maybe third year coaching at John. It was early on.
Second year.
Okay, yeah. So did that kind of play a role that, like, you're sort of the new kid on the block at that point amongst like the private schools and private school states? You didn't want to rock the boat, or?
Yes, absolutely. Let me tell you something, because I never had a problem speaking my mind, and I don't just bow down. I remember looking at the lay of the land and saying, okay, B conference, A conference. I am tired of being called B conference. Like, you're just in a B conference. Like, that means, you've only got 3 fingers on one hand. Why can't we do something to get away from the haves and the have-not moniker, or these are the better teams? Why can't we, when I'm trying to recruit, people will say, well, what conference are you? Are you A conference or B conference? So I would bring that sort of thing up. And I remember the other coaches, one in particular whose name I don't want to mention because he's a pretty good guy and I don't want to talk bad about him. But he just started laughing at me. He's like, because I said, why don't we use red and black? Red conference, black conference. And he said, oh, that's what the girls do. You want us to do what the girls do? and I turned red, and I was embarrassed, and I thought of a few choice words I didn't say. But
Right.
yeah, the B conference team, you are not allowed to beat A conference. You're not allowed to. And then when you get into the A conference, if you're not a good A conference team, you are not allowed to beat McDonough or Mount St. Joe or Curley at the time. So I was just rabble rouser making noise, and I'm like, listen, you guys, we're going to do the best we can. And I mean, I put a thing on the Uncensored page about Matt Miller had the youngest Holmes boy, pinned, and it might have been twice. And same move too. He'd use this neck wrench against McDonough, and the referee would not call the fall. I saw a kid from Mount St. Joe get launched to his back by a kid from Baltimore Lutheran. The referee would not make the call. Everybody in the arena knew the kid was pinned. I saw the same thing happen to Toby Haig from McDonough. He got surprised. The have-nots are not supposed to be the haves, and sometimes referees have a hard time, they get overwhelmed by the crowd. I don't know, because the referee never makes a mistake, right? You got to be careful what you say about the referees, but I think they all do the best they can.
No, you don't. No. We're just friends talking here. Speak your mind. Let's go. We want to hear it. That's what people are listening for.
I think the referees do the best they can, but sometimes they are influenced by the crowd, and they get surprised by things. Matt Miller throwing, I can't think of his name, Curtis Holmes. He threw him down to his back with that neck wrench and had him on his
Curtis, Curtis, Brennan, Travis, I think, were the three.
And he was pinned. Everybody knew he was pinned, but the referee wouldn't call it. And he kept jumping around, and the crowd's going nuts. It's just – but anyways, yeah. So I was a little bit of a new kid in town making noise. And I didn't come – I didn't have the wrestling background and credentials. I mean, you got some guys that wrestled in college. A lot of guys wrestled in college and so on. And I was just a noisemaker. But I got along with all of them too. It wasn't like we had any hard feelings.
No, I mean like we're talking a little bit about the Hartford Grapplers, and it's like, yeah, you guys are going to war like at time, but it's all the teams coming together in the offseason to make the whole product or everybody better around you to kind of raise the ships a little bit. And it's a lot of times I think that coaches don't hate each other. We get along pretty well. Like we all, we're all crazy, but we share that common ground that we're all going to be crazy in this thing together.
Well, I was trying to keep the Hartford County kids home, and Boys Latin, Calvert Hall, and Curley were taking Hartford County kids. And, I needed to figure out, I knew why, because they thought you go to the MIAA, that's the toughest division or conference or whatever in the state, clearly. That's where they wanted their kids to be. Well, why wasn't John Carroll in that division? When it made things a whole lot easier when we got into that division, but you couldn't just jump whenever you wanted. You had to go like every 2 years you could move. But you're better off to be bottom of the A conference than the top of the B.
Yeah.
So is looked down as just something stuck to people's shoe.
So when you first made the transition also, and again, you can be honest with all of us. It's just friends here talking. But I know, like when I was coaching at Owings Mills last year, not this past season, the prior year, we went to the Bethlehem Holiday Classic, which is one of the things. Like that's people will talk about the private schools have an advantage because they go to all these things. Public schools can find a way to find the best competition also. But that's a story for another time. But I know that when I was up there, I'm looking around at some of these coaches, and Jamar Billman, who was an All-American for Lock Haven, Seth Lisa was coaching up there as well. The Roan family's all up there. I don't want to say intimidating necessarily, but it's when they go to argue a call and you have to go to the table also, I just feel like every time I was walking up, I'm not winning this one. Like if it's some kind of, and because in the referee's perspective and everybody in my own perspective, who am I compared to these guys?
I agree with what you're saying. I never really felt that quite to the same extent. Part of the reason is these little pocket Hercules bad guys from college. I'm a foot taller and 150 pounds heavier. So I don't get intimidated in that way.
Right.
But I do get, like, if I were to go and argue a call with Terry Brands, oh yeah, I'd totally be intimidated. But most of these guys, and honestly, Seth Lisa, I've heard the name. What's a Seth Lisa? I don't know this guy. I couldn't pick him out of the crowd. So I wouldn't wear a lot of those guys. I was just, and the other thing is, I don't go to the table. I think I went to the table one time in 30 years. And legitimately went to the table for something other than a score or a time change.
Really? Really?
Because the referees, I feel like when the 1 year that I refereed, somebody told me, I can't remember who it was, he's like, even if you're wrong, you don't change your call. And I thought that was just a standard operating procedure for referees. You don't change your call. So they're not going to change your call. What am I going up there, wasting people's time and stopping the flow of the match? And it just wasn't comfortable for me, so I wouldn't do it. I had parents would freak out. You got to go argue that. I said, why? They're not going to change your call. How many times do you see referees change your call?
Yeah, a couple times, I guess, but very rarely, because they don't want to admit that they were wrong.
Well, and I also, at the end, when I was coaching, right about a couple years in, that's when they came out with that the saying that if the clock or the time of the score doesn't change, you're going to get a warning. So I would check the time of the score from 6-8 feet away from the table. I would just yell it to the referee.
What's a warning though? What's a warning?
It just wasn't my thing. Hey, let me tell you something. I was in a tournament up in Pennsylvania with Keith Runk, who's the head coach of John Carroll now, and he's a state cop. He's a SWAT cop. Always has his gun on him. And we're sitting at a tournament in Pennsylvania, and the referee says, "Coach, if he leaves his chair one more time during the match, right? If he leaves his chair one more time, we're going to be a team point." As soon as the guy turned his back, he blew the whistle, the action starts, Runk stands up. I reached up to do to him what I'd done to Keith, Tom Reese a million times, which is grab his belt and pull him back down. I reached up and I grabbed Runk's gun. He reached around, had my arm. I thought he was going to rip my arm off my shoulder. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I go, you got to stay in this chair. I don't want to lose the team point. It's just, the rule is I'm not arguing. I just follow the rules.
Right. So, around the same time that you're starting, or a couple of years into John Carroll, that's around the time that you start going to the Brute Scholastic Showcase. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's early 2000s. I know.
2001 was my first time when I was my last year at John Carroll at Bel Air was my first year with you and Luke and Jason, and I think, I'm not positive.
No, 2001 I was a senior, so I was going to be offended you didn't ask me to be on the team. But I think we went 2005. But I know Coach Norris, Coach Gillespie, they were involved as well. They moved on and started coaching at Johns Hopkins. But explain that event for the people that don't know. I don't think it's still going on, but just kind of explain the format.
Okay, it is still going on. It's run at a college in Indiana, and we stopped going because the MSWA, when Adelberg and LaValle were the things, they stopped supporting it because it got to be expensive. And I stopped being involved just because I was tired of the the kids will bail on you last second. And I'm not going to a dual meet tournament with a hole in the lineup. I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I had success. We had 2 years where we finished third, and I figured that's as good as we're ever going to be. But anyways, they were the top 9th, 10th, 11th grade dual meet teams from various states that got together for a big dual meet tournament. And it was a lot of fun, and we had a good experience. But it takes a lot of work, and there comes a point where you got to pass it on to somebody else or just step away from it. Well,
no, in Indiana is a lot different than Dover, Delaware, where it formerly was. It's a lot easier to get a group of guys, throw them into a car, and we're going to drive across the bridge and still compete against some of the best. Still if I recall, they had an individual tournament that happened right. So it was like an individual tournament and then the dual meet right after, correct?
They stopped doing that.
Okay, so now it's just dual meets.
That was the U.S. Open, and then they went into the duels, and then towards the end, I think they stopped doing it because it conflicted with the Eastern Nationals or some Mawa event.
Okay.
I remember them using weigh-ins for our event for the Mawa.
Really?
Yeah, they Bill, the Smith guy that was running the Mawas. He allowed that. I can't remember the particulars, but I do remember they were using.
Now, I know one of the years you have a really good memory from going in, starting at the seating meeting, ending with the at the actual competition. I've heard you tell it before, but that's always just a fun one for people to hear, I'm sure.
So I'm going to the tournament was up at the York Expo, the York Fairgrounds, and I'm late. I'm the closest one to the place, and I'm late. So I go pulling into the parking lot. I go to find the seating meeting. I walk down this hallway. There's a million doors. I start opening doors, no signs or anything. I get about halfway down the hallway. I finally open the right door. There's all these coaches sitting in this room. John Cook is running the meeting. They're just getting ready to start. And I walk in. I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry I'm late." He goes, "Well, since you're already up, why don't you tell us about your team?" So Keith Watson from Maryland. We have a pretty good team. He goes, "Where do you think you ought to be seated?" I said, "Second." Everybody started laughing. He goes, "Okay, well, who should be first?" I said, "Well, it should be Pennsylvania." So he writes on the board, Pennsylvania, then Maryland. Somebody says, "Hey, hold on a second." He goes, I'm so-and-so from Searches from Indiana. We've got a really good team. There's how many state champs we have, blah, blah, blah. And I'm still standing. I'm the only one standing at that point, except for Cook. And he goes, "What do you think?" I go, "They should be second. We'll be third." Everybody started laughing. Well, this guy from from Florida says, "Hold on a second. Is this how this is going to go?" And Cook goes, "Well, tell us about your team." He goes, "Well, we're blah, blah, blah from Florida. We got all these, this, that, and the other thing. And we ain't never even been scored on by Maryland." And everybody's like, "Ooh." I made a comment. I said, "Well, maybe we can wrestle each other first round." I didn't even think. So we were seated fourth. We see our draw. We have to wrestle Florida right out of the gate. Now, I didn't go and tell the kids, and I had some characters. I had Pat Carey, Pat Downey. This was the year I had the Pats. I had 5 Pats on the team. And I had some guys that thought they were the baddest guys on the planet, and they were pretty tough. We had Carl Green. That was that was everybody's go-to heavyweight for the All-Star events. But we're out there. We started the very first weight. We got Pat Hutton, who was my number 6th choice on my list for a 103 or 106 pound or whatever it was at the time. And he's out there. He's just getting abused. And I'm like, "Oh, man, I don't want to start off this way." And he comes out of nowhere with seconds left and sticks the kid. Just hits a roll and sticks the kid. Well, that just lit a fuse. We win the match, something like 56-6. And I had told one of the parents about this conversation. And so they had told their kids. So now the kids are going to go. They're like, "See, that's what happens when you talk shit." And I'm like, no. You have to act like we've been here. This is just how we take care of business. Don't start anything here. And we rolled through them like nothing. And I was cool to the coach. And he was like, "Hey, good match. You got a good team there." And I was like, "There you go. You got to take the high road. You don't need to be a jerk all the time."
Right. Yeah. But still.
Let me tell you something else.
Yeah, some of the time.
There was a kid named Mwanza Wolalamba. That was our 200.
Mead kid.
This kid looked like he just dropped out of a test tube. He assisted on a medium singlet at 6'3", 215 pounds. I mean, this singlet fit him. It looked like it came out of an aerosol can. And he beat kids just by standing on the mat. Then we wrestled PA. And he wrestled the Pillsbury Doughboy that looked like he just ate a super, big value meal and went out there and he just high crotch, nice little easy high crotch, takes Mwanza down. And Mwanza's, trying to elbow, trying to get dirty with him right out of the gate. And the kid brings that short little crossface to a crossface cradle and pins him. Mwanza went berserk. And it took me, Matt Miller's dad, who's my size, and Tom Reese. We still couldn't corral Mwanza. But we had Pat Carey and Pat Downey that were able to talk him down because he got kicked out of the tournament. He was ready to kill everybody, break things. It was bizarre. But we wound up getting third at the tournament that year. That was my last year.
No, he's probably not. Do you know what happened to that kid that he wrestled, or was it just some random PA kid?
I have no idea what happened to him. But I do remember seeing Mwanza's birth certificate. It was a piece of notebook paper that says, "I am 16."
Yeah, I think Mwanza lost one match, and it was the state finals his senior year. But his last 2 years of high school, and another one that just worked really hard in the offseason, never never wrestled, I don't believe, before he got to high school over there at Meade.
In Africa or something. He moved here like in 10th grade.
Yeah, he's but just an all-out beast. He definitely took well to this sport. So as you moved on in your coaching career in over at John Carroll, your first state champ, I think, is 2007. John Von Paris, that was your first state champ, correct? And then we're getting now slowly. John Carroll's moving from that 9, 10, 7, 8 spot in the MIA finishes. Now you're moving up and you're flirting with like the a top 5, 4th, working your way in there. In 2011, you guys go in there and like you talked about before, I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, the first time that you beat Mount St. Joe. Any thoughts on that match? And do you recall, how you were feeling going into that match and also leaving it?
I don't remember particular, except that we had a kid. We had a hole in the lineup, and we had to put a backup kid in, and he didn't get pinned. I don't specifically remember that much about it, honestly.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I mean, I look back at the box score, and like I said, did a little bit of research. It looked like later on, Kid Mascotti that you had, he won with a 5-point move in overtime. Match was pretty tight. You guys actually lost. I think it was 5 of the first 6 matches, and then went on to win 7 of the next 8 to close it out. But like a lot of them, you guys are picking away at decisions. It's like a close 2-0 decision, and then also Mascotti with that overtime win as well. Just hard fought. You guys, total team effort. It must have felt like.
Well, that Josh Mascotti was a backup kid, and we seemed like we always had a constant rotation. We had of your 14 starting weights, you had like 7 that were always in the lineup, and the other 7 were on heavy rotation. And we always needed to make sure we had people that were ready to go and people that knew how to could stay off their back. But they also had something in their bag of tricks. Now, Josh Mascotti, whatever it was he hit, it was because George Weber taught him. Because I made George was Josh's student. I mean, Josh was George's student. He taught him whatever ones he used. I didn't teach him. That's where that paid off on marrying up the experienced kids and the rookies.
What do you think about, like, now there's going to be certain kids that become mentors. It's going to come to them a little bit more naturally than it will for others. Like, do you just say, hey, you guys are mentoring kids, like this is your job? And how do you put that responsibility on a kid?
I made them do it, and they could complain about it, and I just say, shut up and do it anyways.
Okay. Gotcha.
But,
well, hey,
some of them,
simple.
Like Ritter didn't like it, but he was good at it. George Weber liked it and was good at it. George Weber is a wealth of wrestling knowledge. Even now, if I could get some of the other things out of his mind, he would be a great coach, just assistant coach for what happens on the mat for somebody. We had a lot of kids that had been through the Colat system, and they went through with Lau Pilati, who was a Romanian Olympian up in Oxford, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. These guys know wrestling, like they know so much wrestling that I'm like, just teach it. Just teach the one thing that you are really good at to this kid, because he needs to have something that he can go to be successful.
Put a tool in the tool belt, right? Like, something that you can go to work with.
That's it.
Great. Well, 2011, there was a couple of firsts that came up. I believe also your first national prep champ happened in Matt Miller that year. Right.
And Matt Miller beat a kid. I can't remember. I think it was sort of like Pittsburgh Catholic or something. Matt Miller was really good, but he had this huge confidence issue. If you weren't exactly the same height, hair color, and weight and everything else, he was like, no, I'm going to lose. And he was scared to death of this kid. And he went out and just put the hammer on him.
Now, when did the switch flip? Now, he wrestled prior to high school, correct?
Yes.
Do you know what junior league he came up in?
He was part of the Middle River program, the Falston program. He was all over the place. Edgewood.
Okay. Gotcha. And he's from Edgewood, right? He's a Harford County guy?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when getting him to come to John Carroll, was there anything – because I'm assuming the St. Joe's and the Curleys and the McDonoughs, like –
the Curly was after him and Boys Latin, but primarily because that's where they shopped. They shopped in Hartford County. Matt never won the junior league anything. Just like
Oh,
Ritter,
really?
Just like Ritter never won any of that stuff.
Wow.
Matt, I think, got third in the Maryland Junior League, if I remember correctly.
Huh. Now but then he would go on to.
The whole thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
The whole thing with getting Matt was the fact that John Carroll's academics were superior, way superior to Edgewood, and I told his dad that I would do whatever I could do to get him into the Naval Academy, and I worked with Slutsky because Slutsky knew Ed Peary, and Ed Peary and Reg Wicks were good buddies, and Bruce Burnett, and we kind of had that whole little. We all sort of knew each other, and I told his dad that I would do whatever I could to get him into an academy because he says I don't have any money for college if I pay for John Carroll.
Oh wow, okay. So that was
Obviously
the plan.
Obviously that worked out.
Yeah.
Oh, it sure did. No, I mean he a couple of state titles, a Mount Madness championship. Like we said, I think he took third at Fargo as well. Yeah, I mean had a really good for a kid that flew under the radar, so to speak, from a lot of the top-notch programs. He really flipped the switch and came into his own, did he not?
He was the most difficult person I've ever had to deal with.
Really?
Difficult. Sometimes parents are over-involved, okay? And they insist that what you're doing can't nearly be enough and more is always better, and they don't think about the burnout factor and so on. Well, Matt Miller would never work his ass off, but he was always working. So, like, I'd watch George Weber. George Weber would go until he sweat blood. He always had to win every push-up contest, every sprint, every this, that, and the other thing. Him and Strapelli, it was always a contest. Miller, he didn't care because he knew his dad was going to take him up to see Lau or take him over to Colat's or get him up at 5 a.m. and make him run, take him in to lift at the proving grounds and then run home, take a shower, and get on the bus to come to school. His dad had him constantly working. So he was very difficult because you're used to seeing successful wrestlers bust their ass. He
right.
Do that. Consequently, it got him in trouble. I mean, Brian Antonelli, the coach at Blair, was the coach at the Naval Academy, was telling me when he was at Naps, they kicked him off. They were going to kick him off the team. He marched to the beat of his own drum. So you have to figure out: will you allow him to be that way because you're going to get wins out of him? Because he wasn't openly disrespectful, although he did like to argue a lot. But he was just very difficult, and they had a come to Jesus meeting with him up at Naps, and they squared him away. They let their company take care of getting Matt squared away.
I gotcha. Cool. No, but I mean, he's you want to talk about some of the all-time best to come through Maryland. When you look at the total body of work, he's got to be on a list somewhere with some of the best kids, even, from what he did in high school, but then what he did afterwards was super impressive as well.
I think you're 100% right. And Matt is an excellent person, good human being. He was just a difficult person to coach. I never had any problem with his character or anything like that. He was just very difficult to coach.
Oh, yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah.
As opposed to like George Weber. George Weber did whatever you asked him to do it, and he would do it twice. George Weber had things going on between those years that would keep him from getting to the very top.
Yeah, it's like you said, not a bad kid, just a challenge to coach sometimes. Sometimes you run into that. He went on to the Naval Academy right out the gate. He's an NCAA qualifier as a freshman and a sophomore. His sophomore year, he loses first round, and then he battles all the way back to the blood round. Ends up losing to Matt Brown, who's a future national champ from Penn State, in the blood round. But then it seems like, man, he's on the cusp of an All-American finish. Before his junior year, blows his ACL, misses the entire season with surgery. And then he comes back his senior year, again, qualifies. I think he won EIWAs as a sophomore, comes back. He has Gabe Dean at his weight. He actually moves up a weight class. I know you're a frequent attender to the NCAA tournament. Were you there his senior year when he was at Navy?
I was at the EIWAs, but I was not at Square Garden. I just don't do big things well. Okay.
Yeah, it's ends up finishing fifth. He has a pin. He pinned Sammy Brooks, the number 2 seed, not in the blood round, but does pin him along the way on his battle back. It's that's got to feel pretty cool. That's something I've never done, coaching an NCAA All-American. That's got to make you feel pretty good, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Matt was, it's just you could never, ever, ever count him out. Between that neck wrench and that chin whip, and then he learned this thing called gator bacon that everybody's going to get thrown at some point. And if it's just a question, can he finish it with it, and will it happen in bounds? But he was something to watch, man. Super exciting. He won the Gregorian Award.
Right, the most pins throughout the tournament at the NCAA tournament, correct?
And he was just super excited to watch. And his dad's a friend of mine. Matt's a friend of mine. It's just a great family, great all the way around. I was super happy to see it happen for him.
Nice. Yeah, another one that you had, Hunter Ritter, was pretty tough around the same era, a little bit later. But that was another one, a national level wrestler. I think he was a 3-time state champ and also another prep champ. You're coaching kids that are national prep champions or contenders for national prep champion. Difference in the way that you run practice from, let's say, 2003 when you walked in the door at John Carroll?
So, yeah, because first off, I learned that you don't need to have a 2-hour practice in order to get work done. We changed our timing and our tempo of practices. At the beginning of the season, we're going an hour and 45 minutes, and it's an hour and a half, then it's an hour. At the end of the season, we're maybe 45 minutes on the mat. And I also learned something along way back when that I passed on that was pertinent to the big guys, the 215s, 220s, and the heavyweights. It's the same thing with the lighter weights. And Ritter was a 184 that was wrestling 95 and 220. Okay? They do not want to run. They don't want to run to make weight. But they will get in the weight room, and I can have them doing power cleans. We used to do a thing called high pulls. It's like an upright row, but you do it from the floor. If you do that sort of thing, you're going to get what you want in terms of cardiovascular endurance. But they want that. They want to lift, and they want to look good. And their singlet, they don't want to look like an emaciated little, a drowned rat. So I would incorporate the weight room work and into the workout and give them. So they didn't have to run. If they wanted to run, you can run on your own. Some kids didn't want to lift, so they could go run. But the big boys always lifted. I remember Henry Franklin telling me one time, he said, it looked like our team was on steroids. We lifted 30, 40 minutes every day, a lot of times every day before practice. Changing body parts, doing this, doing that. But that's what these guys wanted. That was the change. If I felt like if I gave them some of what they wanted, I'd get more of what I wanted.
Ritter's another one. One of the big things that stood out was that he competed actually at the Who's Number One event. And I was looking back at that dual meet. Did you go out there with him to Who's Number One?
Yeah, that whole thing was a fiasco. I mean, I was sold a bill of goods. They didn't tell me that Stevenson. They told me Stevenson was 200. Well, he was every bit at 210, maybe 215, and Hunter was like 190. But I figured,
right.
200, that's not too hateful. But that kid was huge.
But again, that experience, that's got to be awesome.
Well, yeah, and he wanted it because, he was climbing up the ladder, and I knew he could handle himself. And those kind of things, it's different when you got all the eyes are on you. Nobody's going to take a cheap shot, when an event like that. And Hunter was training pretty much year round, so it wasn't like he had a physical or mental letdown because of the time of year that it was.
Yeah, it's Bobby Stevenson, who you're talking about, Gable Stevenson's brother, who's now, just an all-out stud for University of Minnesota. Some of the other names on there: Gavin Teasdale, Larry Early, JoJo Smith, Nick Soriano, Dayton Fix, Matt Klonzik, Keyshawn Hayes, David McFadden, Isaiah White, Mitchell McKee, AC Headley, Cade Brock, Nick Piccinini, Vincento Joseph, both Zaid and Anthony Valencia, Miles Martin, and Mark Hall. If that's not a who's who of wrestling, fast forward a couple of years, those guys all tore it up at the college level. And that just, just looking back at it, I just think looking back, it must be a crazy experience for him to be, in the same program as some of those guys.
Well, Hunter had also won Fargo and had, I guess you'd say, he'd been at the highest level. He was on the world team, junior world team, or a cadet world team. Well, I can't remember which, but he was a different animal. And he had confidence. If you take him and Miller and put them together, I'd love to have seen the match. I'd love to have seen that match. But the difference was Matt Miller had a lot of doubt. Hunter Ritter didn't care who you are, how big you are. First off, when the whistle blows, he's going to pick your ankle. Your ankle must get picked. We called it the bull whip. He would just drop to his knee, grab your ankle, and be standing up with it. And almost nobody could do anything about it. So he had this supreme confidence. Plus, he was like an acrobat. And he flew around. He could almost get himself out of any kind of trouble that he got himself into. But everybody catches up to you. They scout you a little bit. They learn what to look out for, and it caught up to him, when he got into college. But Hunter was something else. I mean, Hunter was one of my favorite people to watch. And when I was coaching John Carroll, we had people transfer to John Carroll that wound up being state placers that couldn't make our lineup at any one of 3 or 4 weight classes. There was a kid named Ben Swanson that finished state runner-up at Seamont Wright. He put that team at 40, 45, 52, or 60.
I remember him. Yeah, it's I remember Swanson.
We just had that chunk of time where we just were so good that, and you could say the same about St. Joe and McDonough and so on, but we were just we felt like we were steamrollers, and it was largely because of Hunter. Because Hunter was a great leader and most of the time, but then he had that little bit of boy, and he would do something stupid. And I would never let him be captain until his senior year, because I just said, any given time you can revert to being a 10-year-old.
Right. Now, his senior year, was that your final year coaching? Was that 2015?
Right.
So that's the last thing I want to touch on before we start wrapping this up. This is, it's been great, but 2015 had to have been a big year for you. Your final year coaching, go out on top, MIAA champions, named Coach of the Year in the state of Maryland. Also, Varsity Sportsnet named you the Coach of the Year. Looking back, a pretty good year to go out on.
Yeah, it was. And like I said before a couple times, people think, wow, that's the time you want to go out when you're on top. But I had given my AD 5-year notice. That was year 5. My daughter graduated from high school the year before. So this was planned. I was coming out. But yeah, I was National Prep Coach of the Year, Maryland Coach of the Year. And people, I was Coach of the Year before for Maryland in 2007, 8, something like that. And, like you and I had talked about, I don't know that I was ever really that great of a quote-unquote coach. I think what I was good at was managing the program and managing the kids and making sure that everybody had what they wanted. But I surrounded myself with Chuck Hart, Tom Reese, Keith Runk, Matt Slutsky, John Thornton, Tommy Free, all these guys that were good at the stuff that I wasn't good at. And I never had I loved coaching the JV. I loved being in the corner of the JV kids and letting the other coaches ride with the better kids. Just because I always felt like there's a lot of self-doubt. I got this in my back of my head from, at my age, I got my dad's voice saying, you're never going to amount to anything. So I got a lot of self-doubt. So I work really hard to try to make sure that I do amount to something. And I would rather have Tom Reese and Matt Slutsky sitting in the corner with Matt Miller because they've been there, done that. I'm not there for that situation to me. I don't need to be in that corner. I'm going to get all the pats on the back anyways. But a good program as a head coach, you're only as good, in my opinion, you're only as good as your support.
All right, so that's where we ended part 2, which I think we both agree on Watty there. Your program's only as good as your support staff. You definitely can't do it all alone.
No, absolutely not. And, we've been, beneficial to get to coach with some really good guys, whether, coaching for the head coach or assistants over the years. And you and I even coaching together, it definitely takes a group effort.
Absolutely. So we ended that part there, and there's one more sort of mini episode, so to speak, where we start to dive into the MSWA stuff that Watty does. And I think we both agreed that there's definitely going to need to be a whole new episode dedicated to the MSWA.
Absolutely. Now, we're just starting to scratch the surface with the MSWA one with part 3 of this. Again, keep in mind, guys, we're still learning at this, so please continue with the feedback. I want to make sure that we're going to work really hard to bring you guys what you want to hear. So if you have any ideas or any other guests that you want to hear from, definitely contact us and let us know.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys.